Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome back to another Starter Set Saturdays. Today we are taking a look at the 2004 D&D 3.5 basic game. So just a few numbers to kind of throw at you there. This was, like I said, released in 2004, and I wasn't able to find an MSRP as there's no price printed on the box itself. However, I do remember paying $45 for it back in 2004. So I believe the retail price for us Canadians was $39.99, and with U.S. Canadian prices were usually about $10 different back then. So this was probably, in my estimation, a $29.99 U.S. Retail price for this back in 2004. So, yeah, we're going to take a look at everything here. And this, first of all, like, I love the box art, so we're getting into the presentation and production quality. The Black Dragon, especially from the 3rd edition era, like the Dragon's design was used for 3rd edition, 4th edition, and the 2014 5th edition. So this version of the Black Dragon is just my all-time favorite dragon design. So seeing, the dragon squaring off with Regdar here, our iconic Player's Handbook fighter, was just a really cool scene. In fact, this artwork would actually be used again in the 4th edition era Dragon's collector set. So the inside of the box would actually feature this artwork once again. You also have like the bright yellow here, which would really capture your eye. You got the 3rd edition D&D logo. Along the sides, you just have the artwork and the dragon and the artwork again of like the treasure. And on the back, you have something like really just, I don't know, maybe it's just me, and I know like a lot of younger people won't be able to relate to this at all, but seeing like the kids gathered and playing the game on the back of the box really reminds me of when I got my original Nintendo Entertainment System in like 1988, and you had like the family gathered around like the television watching the kids play. I don't know, I just kind of get those vibes from this. And also, just like a really, like, I don't know, just feels like a really staged photo. I don't know. It's one of those things that it was, like, 20 years before this came out, that was just, like, how boxes were. Like, board game boxes might have, like, the exaggerated, like, family having fun playing the game sort of thing on it. So, I don't know, it just really reminded me of that. And maybe it's just me. Now, inside of the box, it does include 4 double-sided map tiles, 4 character sheets, 7 dice, which I will have to grab to show you here because I don't have the original dice that came in the set, so I will get those in a moment. And we also have the first adventure book, the Quick Start rules, the advanced rule book, and I would suggest, or see, probably, think that the main reason that a lot of people bought this set back in the day was it came with 16 painted miniatures, 4 for the heroes, and then 12 monsters. So we're going to go ahead and unbox this, and we'll see everything that's inside, and I'll continue with my breakdown of the presentation and production quality. Alright, so through the magic of pausing the recording, when we open the box, we do see that we have the dice and the components all inside. So we'll start with the dice that would have been included with this set. So they're your basic multicolored dice set here, and we'll take a look again at those here in a moment. We do have our miniatures as well. And so, for example, they would be stamped with the, I don't know if it'll show up on the camera or not, it might show up better on the Black Dragon, but it says D&D Basic, and then it gives like the number of the thing, and then the Black Dragon. So, again, we'll take a closer look at some of these, but we got some kobolds. So we have 2 of these kobolds with the crossbows. So at this point in time, they were pulling these minis from the D&D Miniatures tabletop game that they would release with random boosters. A booster had, at this point in time, had 8 minis in it, and you would get 4 common rarity minis, you would get 3 uncommon rarity minis, and then you would have 1 rare. And you would also pay, the price for the minis was started off at $15 per booster. and then eventually went up to about $20 per booster. I think around this time they were either the 15 or the 20. I think they might have been the 20 because they released 3 sets and then the huge set, which went up to $30 and went back down. So it was $15 or $20 for the boosters, for the minis there. But these were commons. We've got some more kobolds here, so I can find the kobolds with the spears. We also had a pair of skeletons. Spooky skeletons, because we are in October, and of course these ones were really prone to leaning forward, just based on the way that they were in the box. But still, pretty decent paint jobs for like these minis back in the day. Considering again, these likely would have just been like common minis back in the day. We also got the skeletal wolf. And that chain is actually a loose second piece that goes around. And the skeletal would have been common as well. We've got, I guess, just the one troglodyte. Then we've got a pair of orcs. The troglodyte was also, so we're getting a lot of commons in this thing. Then we got a pair of the early style of D&D mini orcs, which look very like gorilla apish kind of design to their faces. Like they were called the Planet of the Apes orcs from like the D&D mini line back in the day. Then of course we've got our little dire rat here. And truthfully, I didn't get very many of these minis. These dire rats. I had like I think the diseased dire rat. I had a few of those. So we've got, and then of course our black dragon, which was like the main event mini. This was a rare, as you can see by the star down there. So that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, okay, so we got the right number in there. And then we've got our hero characters. So we've got Lyda, the halfling rogue. We have Aramel, the sorcerer, half-elven sorcerer, I believe, or elven sorcerer. Then we have Ebrick, the dwarf cleric. And these guys would have been at the uncommon rarity. And then, of course, we've got our Regdar here. And he had the little diamond there. So he was at the uncommon rarity as well. So for the breakdown of the minis, you got 1 rare. Then you had 11 common and 4 uncommon minis. So while the price was similar to buying a couple of boosters, the actual breakdown and what you get is a little bit different. However, you were guaranteed these minis. So this was actually really cool to see back in the day. So let's kind of push these guys to the back here for now. We did have our survey card, which I always keep these. Just these cardboard fillers. And then we've got the Quick Start rules and the First Adventure booklet. So for the Quick Start rules, again, nice full color printing there. Gives you a breakdown of how to do the combat, attack rolls, how to move, cover, things like that nature. And then the First Adventure booklet actually gives you the setup for what you're doing and why you're going into this dungeon. So a nobleman had his ring stolen, his signet ring stolen, and is offering the group 300 gold pieces if they can find it. So it gives you the flavor text to set up, the flavor text for the room that you start off in, and you have the battle against the 4 kobolds to begin the scenario with. And then there's the exploration. And at the end of that, when you defeat the 4 kobolds and you get the treasure, you do find the noble's ring, which you can take back to him to get the reward for that early, or you can continue to press on into the dungeon. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We've also got some character special ability breakdowns here. So the spells and sneak attack functions, as well as the read this first section, determining who's the dungeon master, who's the player. And then we do have our pre-generated characters here. So we got Regdar, and then it gives you like the dice here. So you got like the D4, the black D4, the red D6, the blue D8, the green D10, the yellow D12, the orange D20, and the purple, they call it D90, but this was like your percentile dice, so your tens digits. And then on the back it shows the mini as well as the skills that Regdar has and the different like saving throws and stuff like that. So we got that character information. Then we've got Eberk here. And his info. Aramel, the elf sorcerer, so I guess he's full elven. And then we got Lida, the halfling rogue. So we have the characters and stuff there. Then we've got the rule book, the advanced rule book. And this is where the presentation for me takes a bit of a hit. Because you had, like, everything was nice and full colored. This wasn't a cheap set to begin with. Compared to the 3.0 version of the adventure game, which was, I think, like $9.99 US back in the day. So this was something that you were paying a premium for, and the adventure book and the quick start rules were in color. The rule book here is all black and white, which the inside contents is not too bad, but the covers are in black and white, which, you might think, oh, well, they're just trying to save money, right? And that's fair. That is definitely a fair thing to assume. But then the inside of the covers are in full color. So I don't know why the outside would be black and white, but the insides of the covers would be in full color. And this wasn't a cheap product either, so I think that at least the cover should have been in color, because it already sort of was. So I don't know why, it's just jarring to look at like that and to go and see what we have there in terms of black and white, and then all of a sudden there's color on the inside. They also included the stat cards for the D&D Minis game for the models as well, which I did have to cut the Black Dragon one out because I lost his stat card back in the day. And then we've got our 4 dungeon tile sheets. I'll just move this off to the side here, move that off. And so you've got the 4 tiles here. We're going to show 2 at a time. Alright, so you can kind of get an idea of how these look. They're both, whoops, didn't mean to hit the camera there. They're both double-sided, or all of them are double-sided. Right, and then there you go there. So that's kind of the setup that you have for the tiles. And the tiles are like a decent card stock. However, I will say that there is one issue with them, and this does count as part of the production part of the grading here for this video, is that the tiles are fairly prone to warping, especially if you live in a place like I do in Nova Scotia, where the humidity is just always through the roof. They're actually laying pretty flat now, but I do have a dehumidifier running 24/7, 365. But when I was originally having a friend of mine run this, and I just played it just for something for us to do that day, the tiles were noticeably warped. And if you take a look at the back of the box there, the tiles do look like they're kind of curling up on the table. It doesn't look like they're quite sitting flat. It might be hard for the camera to kind of pick up on that, but you can see a little bit of a shadow underneath there that gets a little thicker towards the corner where it does look like the tile is lifted up. So, from a production standpoint, and presentation and production, they do some things really well, and then they do some really questionable things like the black and white cover outside cover of a book where the inside is full color. So I'm going to give the presentation and production quality, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. The minis were already produced for the miniatures game. I mean, yes, the stamping on the base is different, but it's something that, you know, they had those, and they weren't produced specifically for this game. Like, nothing in this box, I believe, is a unique sculpt. I mean, maybe the Regdar could be, just because he's different from the one that was initially released, so I don't know if, like, maybe his model was unique to the box set, but everything else, I've got tons of. I have tons of those kobolds, I've got tons of those troglodytes, I have another version of that black dragon, I got a ton of those skeletons, I have at least a couple of Lidas, although the other two characters I didn't have any, like I didn't have any Eberks or any Aramils, so it's cool to have them. So 6 out of 10, just again some weird decisions being made here. I think overall they did an okay job, but I cannot let this slide because it's just so weird to me that they would colorize the inside of the cover, but not the outside. And again, like, this was something that cost me $45 back in the day. It probably cost U.S. Consumers about $30 back in the day. So for that kind of money, like, it might have been nice to have at least had this in color, especially where they already used color on the same, like, piece of, like, cardstock cover material. So I'm going to give the presentation and production a 6 out of 10 as far as that goes. So now we're going to move on to the rules quality. So that is the next aspect here. So this one book contains the rules as well as the adventure. So we do have the ability to, like, we do have a little bit of character creation in this. So we do have, like, the blank character sheet here that you can use for, you know, to create your own characters if you wish. So it is great that it has character creation as well as the pre-gens. So, you know, I've talked about this concept before, and I know it's more of a board game thing, but when it comes to RPG starter sets, I think it is, again, a very important concept, and that is the Christmas morning test, which is how quickly after you know, rip open the wrapping paper on something like this that would be gifted to you, you know, can it be before you are, like, at the table playing the game. And when you have the ability to choose, I like that option. So with the pre-gen characters, you can be playing this pretty quickly, especially with the quick start rules and the first adventure book. Like, the quick start rules gives you, like, the basics of combat, which is essentially what a large portion of this is. And the first adventure book has all the information that the dungeon master needs to be able to run that encounter, and sort of gives you the things that you would need to know as they would sort of come up in the combat order. So it's really kind of cool to see how they handle that. They also have fixed initiative scores for everything in this game, so you don't roll for initiative, just each character has an initiative score, and you just use that to determine what order things go in. So again, it makes things like the first adventure book predictable. You know what the turn order is going to be. So it's cool that they have that. It's cool that they have the character creation thing. It is a little bit spotty in terms of kind of what you get, because the skill list is pretty small, and I don't see anywhere about, like, gaining skill points. It just seems like you have all of these skills available to you. In fact, the humans that were supposed to start with a bonus feat, which they do get here, they get a bonus feat, and they were supposed to get, like, an extra skill point that they can use when they're choosing their skills, but they changed that to just getting a +2 bonus on a single skill of your choice. So it's a really stripped down and simplified version of character creation, but it does still work. You do get the options of, like, the humans, dwarves, elves, and halflings, and you get your sort of 4 core classes there with the cleric, although I think that's an evil priest. It's interesting that they show that there. The fighter, the sorcerer, and the rogue. So kind of neat to have that, and they have support up to level 2, and then for level 3 characters, you have to go and pick up the player's handbook, which is advertised in full glorious color on the back of the book there. You also get, like, a list of feats. So again, there's really nothing about skills, so you just seem to have them all that are on those sheets, and then you go right into your feats. It does tell you what the skills are, but it doesn't tell you like how you earn them. So it's just, I think you just get +1 to each skill every level, and you don't like pick and choose which ones you have available to you. So a little bit weird that way, but it works for like a starter set. And then you got your equipment section. A lot of the artwork is repeated from the player's handbook, which is actually kind of cool to see. You got the different armors there, and then you have a more in-depth combat rules description. So, like, the rules here are pretty well done and pretty well laid out. You do get the character creation stuff as well, which I said is always going to be a bonus. I don't like to take points away for not having character creation, but I can certainly see adding points for having it there. And then we get like the Dungeon Master's Guide, which talks about creating adventures, which I'll get into a little bit more here. There is some really good advice in here, like 100%. I think that they do like a really good job of giving you like the details. They look at the treasure, and then we get into our sample dungeon. So the rules quality, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. And it, like I said, includes character creation, though it isn't quite one-to-one with what it would be in the final player's handbook. Like, you wouldn't be able to take this character as is and just run it using the player's handbook. You would have to like make some decisions and have to sort of retweak the character, including like skill choices and things of that nature. But it gives you everything that you need. It's laid out really well. So yeah, I'm going to say a 7 out of 10. It's definitely above average, like what you'd expect. It definitely goes above the bare minimum that at a starter set like you should include for like their rules and stuff. So I'm going to give that a 7 out of 10. The adventure quality. So here we've got our sample dungeon. We did start off with the room with the kobolds there, and the whole sole motivation for entering this dungeon in the first place was to recover a noble's signet ring, which you do after defeating the kobolds. So the rest of the dungeon is really just up to the players to want to explore, or you kind of have to put them on the rails a little bit. It doesn't really give you a good motivation for wanting to go throughout the rest of the scenario, which I think is a little bit unfortunate. It is kind of your typical dungeon crawl. It uses all 8 of the tiles, all like both sides of all 4 double-sided tile sets there that you can see sort of laid out, which you'll never be able to see this on your table because, of course, it uses both sides of each sheet. So you can only have, like, when you get to this room, you can't have this one displayed. They do a pretty good job of making it so that you can still have a few rooms kind of going, but for example, you can't have this room and this room showing at the same time. You can't have this room and this room showing at the same time. These two, like, this is not terrible, but if you're playing at a table, I think what they should have done was had the first sample dungeon use 4 tiles and then have options for creating your own follow-up adventure that uses any combination of the tiles that you want. I think that would have been a little bit better. But you are going through, you're fighting an assortment of creatures like the troglodyte, the skeletons, you got the kobolds there, the rat morn, which has a single rat, you've got the orcs there, and then finally the black dragon. There is one really cool moment here, and this is a spoiler, but when you get to area number 5, it looks like. When you get to room number 5, there is the illusionary dragon. So when you enter the room, like the Dungeon Master puts down the dragon mini, and it was a pretty effective, like, oh crap kind of moment. And then the dragon does breathe fire, his acid breath immediately on you. And then you realize that you didn't take any damage from it. Like, the DM rolls damage, but then, like, doesn't actually, like, you don't actually take anything. I think once you attack the dragon, it turns back into, or when you kill the dragon, it turns back into, like, the kobold that it was before. It was definitely a cool moment, and probably the highlight of the entire thing. Unfortunately, it's kind of the only really, like, memorable aspect of the scenario. I think it would have been cool to have included some tokens, like just some punch-out, like, thin cardstock tokens of other creatures that don't appear in the base scenario to be able to create something else with. Like, you've got these, you have, like, this crypt area, And like there might be the skeletons there, but it would have been cool to have maybe had like a zombie or maybe even like a ghoul or something to fight there. So I don't know. It's an okay adventure, but it doesn't really give you a reason to go back into the dungeon or to continue going through the dungeon. And it's more or less just like for the exploration sort of aspect of it. It's an okay, serviceable adventure, but at the end of the day, the only thing you're really going to remember coming out of this was going to be when you got tricked into thinking that you found the dragon early and thought your character was screwed when they got hit with the acid breath. But yeah, it's okay at the end of the day, and I want to give it a higher score, but again, it is missing motivations, it's missing like explanations as to why you're going to continue going through. So I think I'm going to give this adventure quality a 6 out of 10. It is better than like what I would like the minimum expectation would be for these types of scenarios. So again, when I give a score, the numbers actually mean something. So a 6 out of 10 is still, better than like what I consider to be the baseline, which is 5 out of 10. It just doesn't quite go above and beyond the way that some other scenarios kind of do. And again, it would have been nice to have had some extra included things to allow you to create your own scenario, because like you have the tiles, you can lay them out however you wish. You've got these creature stats, but they all appear in the previous adventure, and you don't have any other like boss type of creature to use. If they would have included just a small sheet of just cardstock tokens, they didn't have to be minis, but just a small sheet of cardstock tokens like what they had in the 3.0 adventure game, and give you a few more stat blocks for creatures that don't appear in the base scenario, then like this would have been a much better use of things in my opinion. But I'm going to give the adventure quality a 6 out of 10. And then we are looking at the value for your dollar, and that's where things get a little bit interesting. Because let me just pack everything back up here as we're talking about this, because really what you have is you've got what at the time was the most expensive starter set that I had ever purchased, and not even just initially, like for years this was still like the most expensive starter set that I had ever purchased. So you have to like justify that money, and the best way to do that is going to be with the inclusion of the D&D minis. And as far as like everybody that I know personally that ever actually bought these sets, and I'm just using that as sort of a baseline, I know that's not going to be the case for everybody, but for the most part, like the people that I know that purchased this, they bought this box set specifically for these guys, for the guaranteed minis, for the guaranteed Black Dragon. Like that was the main reason why a lot of folks that I know purchased this set. And I think what the issue really could have been is like this is something that should have been on store shelves and like big box stores. Like it should have been at places like department stores like Walmart or Target. I can't remember if Zellers was still around in Canada at the time that this was coming out or not. I don't think it was. I think we had Walmart by then, which shut everything else down. But this is something that really should have been like at those stores. This should have been on the board game shelf in like places like Walmart. Like the presentation is very catchy as far as like the outward presentation is concerned. Like the box itself is very, very eye-catching. You do have that sort of like old school like kids playing the thing on the back of the box there, and you do get some good stuff in there for what you're paying. But if we just break down again the fact you're getting 16 minis, which is the equivalent of buying 2 boosters, and you know what you're getting. So 2 boosters of D&D minis at this time would have been minimum $30, but could have also been upwards of $40 at that time. And if it was $40 for 2 boosters of minis, for us Canadians anyway, that's the same price as the entire box set. So the fact that you get a set of dice, you get the tiles, you get the adventure, like that's just sort of like icing on the cake sort of thing. So the minis alone justify a fair portion of the value of this box set. and you're not really going to be disappointed with it because of the fact that you're buying it largely for those pre-painted non-randomized minis. Now, it's not the same breakdown. Like, if it would have been the exact equivalent of buying 2 boosters, then there should have been 8 of the 16 should have been common. Then you should have had 6 of the remaining ones to be uncommon, and there should have been 2 rares. But at the same time, you are getting guaranteed minis, and knowing what you're getting goes a long way towards like paying that price. So, just for the minis alone, throwing in the tiles and everything else, I'm going to give the value for your dollar again an 8 out of 10. I just can't remember exactly what the price of boosters were at the time, if they were 15 or 20. Because if they were 20, again, 2 boosters is the exact same as buying this box set. So, you were definitely doing all right in terms of like your value for dollar there. And you do get the tiles are nice, so it is cool to have that if you wanted to like use those to create some makeshift dungeons or encounter areas. They never released any other like tiles that were quite like that, which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to have had like a stack of those types of tiles that you could use to like build off of the ones that included in the basic game. But it is what it is. They did release dungeon tiles later on, but they were like pieces that you could punch out that might be as small as like 1 inch by 1 inch, or they could be like a whole like 8 by 10 or something like that. But yeah, some really cool stuff there. So 8 out of 10 for the value for dollar. So, before we get to the overall score, I'm just going to go over sort of the pros and cons of this set. I always start with the cons first because I'd rather end on a positive note. So, the drawbacks of this is that it does only include 1 scenario while still providing information on creating your own. Now, you could use the same minis and the same like dungeon tiles to do another adventure like sometime down the road, like if you really wanted to. But it gives you tools to create a secondary scenario, but it doesn't give you anything unique to put into it. So I don't see those options being used a whole lot. The minis are a great value. Of course, they only do include a single rare. So while price point is similar as buying 2 boosters of minis, you're not quite getting the same breakdown. And sometimes those rares, could be like a really big thing. Like the Black Dragon was a huge score for this box, and that's why I know there's several people that own this box. That's the reason that they bought it. But if they could have had that and maybe something else, like another boss level creature that they could have used for that follow-up adventure, this would have been far like that would have turned the sort of the drawback into a positive. And yeah, like I said, the minis were basically the main reason for owning this. The tiles were great, but they were subject to warping if you are in a high humidity environment, which I definitely, like Nova Scotia always is. So when you're paying for those components, it'd be nice if they didn't like kind of curl up and they'd be able to sit flat on the table. Although, if you're in a place with a good dehumidifier, they do seem to lay flat pretty well. So they are looking much better now that I'm down in the basement with the dehumidifier than when I was living in my apartment. And we tried using them and they were like kind of like semi-curled up. Now, on the positive side, you do get, again, character creation and pre-generated characters, which is always going to be a positive. Like, that's always going to be a pro, I should say, in any of these starter sets that include both of those options. So, that's always something I'm going to point out. It is great to have the ability to customize. Of course, if you're using the minis, you still have to pick a mini that may not match what your character is, but that's not really the end of the world. The quick starter rules allow for like you to play like right out of the box, essentially, which is great. So that's that Christmas morning type of thing. And having the minis on like the tiles, the 1 inch tiles, does go a lot for trying to help beginners understand the game. And I know that there's theater of the mind folk out there that think that that's the best way to play the game. Whatever works for you is great. I prefer the use of minis because I've learned that even if you've got veterans at the table, they'll all kind of have their own interpretation of where they are, where the other player characters are, and where the enemies are. And when I was doing Theater of the Mind, every single turn on every single player's go, the first question that they would have, if they weren't already in melee with somebody, is, okay, how far is the closest enemy? How far is the closest PC? right? And trying to get that idea of the battlefield. So I use minis all the time at this day and age. Even when I'm running my online games, the players cannot see them. I still have minis next to me so that I can always give the same answers to the players as far as like distances and stuff are concerned. So just having that visual representation on the table is a huge thing and can make playing the game just so much smoother for beginners. So I think that that's an absolutely great inclusion and it works really well. So going back to again our different categories, production and presentation, I gave a 6 out of 10. Again, the weird black and white outer book cover but full color inner book cover was really weird because it's the same sheet of cardstock. The rules quality was 7 out of 10. Excuse me. The adventure quality was 6 out of 10, and the value for your dollar was an 8 out of 10, which brings us to a total of 6.75 out of 10. It's not a bad score. This is still a fun evening or afternoon of like RPG glory. Like, you're still going to have a fun time with this. It's a cool box. It has some really great components. But at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to remember, like, going through the entire, like, you're not going to remember the setup or the adventure as well as you would something like Keep on the Borderlands or like you would Lost Mine of Phandelver. You will remember, I think, that illusion, like the illusory dragon breathing, acid on you at the beginning of the, when you first go into this room. I think that can stick with you because I remember that all these years later, but I didn't remember any other single encounter, like, specifically, except for the final encounter with the dragon. So it's one of those things where you're going to have fun with it. It's going to be a great afternoon of playing some, 3.5 light D&D. It's going to be great for that. But you're going to put this back on the shelf, and it's going to be something that you're going to kind of forget about. And it's mostly, like I said, everybody that I know, including myself, that bought this set bought it for the minis and not so much for the scenario or the adventure or anything else that was included in the box. So again, that's not going to be everybody's situation, but I just know too many people that have it and they all said the same thing. They bought it for the minis. So that's definitely a part of it. So a great, afternoon of fun, but ultimately, it's something that you're not going to remember a whole lot. 10, 15, 20 years later, sort of thing. So 6.75 out of 10. Again, a decent score because, it's above average. They went, above what the minimum expectations were in every category. I still think that this is a great product, but it's, when compared to even just other D&D starter sets, there are other ones that I would far rather pick up off the shelf and run than this one here. So I think a 6.75 is fair. Let me know in the comments below. Did you pick up the 2004 D&D basic game? If so, did you buy it because you wanted to have a starter set for the D&D? Was it your introduction to 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons? Or did you buy it for the minis? Did you buy it just because it's a box set, which is kind of another reason that I wanted this as well? And did you get the 2005 version? Unfortunately, I only bought this box set. I did not get the next year's version or the player's kit, which was just the player's handbook. I don't think it had any minis or anything with it. They came with a booster of minis, but it was from a set that I wasn't overly interested in. So I never bought the other ones, but let me know in the comments below. Did you own this set? Did you buy it as a starter set, or did you buy it as a quick start collection of minis? Thank you all so very much for your time. I appreciate it. The new poll is up and running. So if you want to have some input as to what the next Starter Set Saturdays video is going to be, then by all means, it should be on the community tab on my page, and be sure to vote there. Thank you to everybody who did vote on this poll. I do appreciate it, and we will see you all in the next one. Until then, take care.